Hello, and welcome to another segment of the Coatesville Area Public Library's Oral History Project. I'm your host, Kirk Witmer, and with me today is another Coatesville native. Please welcome Dr. Horace K. Bonsall.
It's nice to be with you,
Dr.
Kurt.
Bonsall, it's very nice to have you as a part of our project.
I think it's a wonderful project.
Looking back over your history, I know you're just a few days shy of your 70th birthday.
That's correct,
and
this Friday.
You were born right here in Coatesville. Exactly where?
In the Coatesville Hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents moved to Fleetwood Street, and I lived the early years there. Then we moved to Pennsylvania Avenue. And
How old were you when you moved?
I was 10.
10. So you must have some early memories of Fleetwood Street.
I certainly do.
Tell us about them.
Well, I always remember the steam engine, because Fleetwood Street was right next to the railroad tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember helping my mother every morning, opening the windows and wiping the soot off the windows.
From the steam engine?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I also remember some things that I was told not to do, like crossing the railroad tracks with my buddies, heading up to the hill, which of course there was no Elmwood Gardens or anything there, and playing our cowboys and Indians. And then even going clear over the hill to fish over at the waterway and over at Curtis Dam.
Mm-hmm.
Fleetwood Street was it was a nice street. There's a lot of well-known people that lived on it. I know Dr. Dalton, a dentist, a dear friend of mine who's passed away. The manager of Lipkins in those years, ministers and all lived on Fleetwood Street.
Mm-hmm.
I lived on 354 Fleetwood Street, which doesn't mean anything to anyone except that later the chief of police, Doherty, lived in that, so that was sort of our claim to fame.
There you go. It sounds like it was probably a very quiet neighborhood at the time.
No, it wasn't.
No.
We had trains every 15 minutes and 20
Uh-huh.
minutes. So it wasn't quiet at all, Kurt.
And you then moved over to?
One other thing I'd like
Yes.
to say about that. We had the advantage, though, that I could brag that right up at the station, I saw Roosevelt stop at the train station.
Mm-hmm.
And we also had Truman stop at the train station. And then Coatesville's Hall of Fame picture on Life magazine back in the 40s when Wendell Willkie was running for president.
Right.
He stopped, and every kid, not me though, fortunately every kid was there making faces and wiggling their ears and everything, and it ended up on the cover of Life magazine. I know a few
wow.
people have that cover. If you get a chance that someone has it in Coatesville, that'd be a good one to put in your.
Another claim to fame for Coatesville.
Right.
Their wiggling ears on Life magazine cover.
Right.
And your next home?
Pennsylvania Avenue, up towards the top of the hill. Fairview Cemetery's up at the top.
What address?
129. I was midway on the left-hand side up above Walnut Street.
Mm-hmm.
My recollections of Pennsylvania Avenue was brick sidewalks, climbing on my hands and knees in the winter on the ice. But the most fond memory I have, and it always has stayed with me, was Pennsylvania Avenue was a canopy of trees. That whole Pennsylvania Avenue was just covered with beautiful trees, and Veterans Day, parades, they all came up Pennsylvania,
Yes, they
marched
did.
all the way up to Fairview Cemetery. We'd go up and wait for the veterans to fire their shells, and we'd try to collect the casings and everything. But it was very fond memories. And the other thing about Pennsylvania Avenue, and this is probably true of everyone my age in their youth that lived in Coatesville, could name everyone on that street.
Mm-hmm.
I could go up, we meet for coffee at a particular pharmacy every morning, and we discuss this, and a lot of us say, yeah, we could all do that. We could name them.
Yeah. Now, Horace, tell me about life for a teenager in Coatesville.
Well, life for a teenager at my time
Mm-hmm.
was no car.
Shoe Leather
Right.
Express.
We walked.
Mm-hmm.
We were fortunate on Pennsylvania Avenue. I could walk to Scott with no problem at all. Could sleep late a little bit to get there. Now, some of my friends that lived over in West End, no buses, no cars. they had to walk from West End.
To Scott.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There weren't many snow days either. We walked, and probably with all the other people you interviewed, they're probably talking to about the largest blizzard and everything. But we had some heavy snows, but we managed to get to school.
Mm-hmm.
Teenage time was fine. Our teenage life were steak sandwiches,
Where?
French fries, Rendezvous, Odenweiler's down in Callan. There's a lot of steak shops around. We used to hang out in the back booths at Sandy's too for a milkshake and everything.
Mm-hmm. Did Sandy's have his jukebox then?
Oh yeah, we had our favorite numbers, you know, Frankie Lane and Perry Como and Frank Sinatra. And there was always an argument who we thought was the coolest.
Yeah, I'm sure. You graduated from high school in what year?
47.
Mm-hmm. And then it was off to college for you, right?
Yeah, I went to Penn, University of Pennsylvania, for undergraduate and graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And then after I finished dental school, I was married.
Mhm.
My wife Helen, I met her at the Coatesville VA hospital. And they were waiting for me as soon as I had a deferment until I got
Mhm.
and then I was a naval officer stationed in Iceland for a year, came back, worked in the Bainbridge Hospital, and then I set up my practice, came back to Coatesville,
Mhm.
and at the time, my wife and I rented an apartment at Elmwood Gardens, which was the fanciest apartment you'd ever want to see at that time.
Mhm.
$81 a month.
Oh, my.
Security deposit needed though.
I'm sure. Horace, after being away from college and a year in the military, when you returned to Coatesville, was there any specific thing that you can recall that was changed, that caught your attention?
You have to realize I came back in 1955, 56.
Mhm.
And at that time, nothing had really changed. I could go up, I was a member of service clubs, because there was a lot of active service clubs then, and it was proper for a young dentist just coming to join a service. I was a member of the Optimist Club. Of course, there was Lions and Rotary. But these service clubs included all the managers and everything of all the stores.
Mhm.
And all the stores were in function. I could go down at Christmas time and start and go to Kinney's and have the manager there say, I want these shoes. He'd say, we don't have them, but I'll have them. They'll be wrapped. Going down to Hyman's, Tux, over to Shirt Tux, down to Lipkins. I mean, at that time, no, there wasn't a change. I was above the Sears building, which was common for most dentists at the time to have a second-story office.
Right.
And across the street was Dr. Ridgway and Dr. Conrad, and they were on the second floor.
And what was below them?
That would have been Christopher's dry cleaning shop.
Really?
Yeah. One of our teachers, Judy Christopher, that was her parents. And they came over and were very nice and greeted me and everything. 10 years at the Sears building, and then
And where exactly was the Sears building?
Sears building, if you would go today and go at the Coatesville Flower Shop
Mhm.
and go down to the next building, past the little
Going
park,
east. Mhm.
going west.
Oh,
You're at the Coatesville Flower Shop, and you're heading west. There's the little park where Santa used to be,
mhm.
and then the next building was the Sears building.
Yes.
Then an apartment building and home of a former dentist became available, and it was on Chestnut Street behind Hennessy's Pharmacy. Dr. Geis, and he had passed away, and his wife had passed away, and this opportunity began. And that's where I set up my practice, and I practiced there till I retired.
Mhm.
So at the time, and if you ask me, well, if you had it to do over again under the same circumstances, would you come to Coatesville? And the answer would be yes. Under the circumstances now, you would think twice because of the problems the city of Coatesville is having.
Give me your impressions, your observations on those kinds of changes that we've experienced in those intervening years. What do you think of the causes? What do you think we need to do?
Well, everybody likes to say, well, it's crime and drugs for the business district, but actually the first trigger was the malls. Little businesses just couldn't compete. So that sort of triggered the stores and everything. And then, of course, when the Horowitz property was sold up on South Hill to the county commissioners and the housing authority, and approval voted by, I know all the council members, I don't know who they are, but I bet they all wish they hadn't done it. But that started it, and that was the second thing that really enclosed. It's a mistake. Everybody knew it was a mistake all over the country, these confined areas to place the poor and underprivileged. So that would have been the second cause. And Coatesville's not unique. I mean, you can go upstate, you can go to these towns. But we happen to have been such a fantastic city and the hub of everything. When we shut down, we were it was quite a glaring thing to the whole county.
Yeah. Horace, I know you've had, well, I don't want to call it a political career, but you've been involved in politics a little bit. Tell us about those years.
Well, I was asked to run for school board, and it was a very exciting time because it was when all the small districts were all going to come together into one large Coatesville area school district.
And those would have been what years?
That would have been mid-'60s. And in 1965, in coming aboard, there were 9 of us. Then we consolidated to 9 in the election. And I had the ability to, I shouldn't say the ability, the privilege to, with the building of the senior high school. And that was something that I was always very, very proud of. And turned out to be a pretty fine structure, and they've kept control of it real well. It was also the time of the NACP, and they became very active. And Coatesville had to deal with our segregation, integration of the schools, proper numbers of students and everything, and the school board had to deal with that, which was very good. And at that time, we hired Frank Armstead, who was our leader as far as helping us with the needs of the underprivileged, and that worked out fine also.
What was his approach to dealing with the issues that you were faced with?
He'd come in and he'd say it. He said, this is the problems I see. He said, you hired me and you asked me. He said, this is the problems I see, and the things have to be solved. For instance, James Adams, which was named Harris, that had to go. I mean, that was just an awful school. I played basketball over there as a young man, 13, 14, and it was just a disgrace that the poor kids had to play that. My daughter did attend 1 year there when we were in the process of balancing the schools. And this was also the state announced, look, you do it. If you don't do it, you're not going to get some funds. And everybody did it but Philly. And they're still in the rules, in the legal situation with the state. But I had no qualms. I thought that was we had some large crowds occasionally when we had to change the
Boundary lines, I'm
Yeah,
sure.
you know, the people at the bottom of the hill wanted the bus to stop there. The people at the top of the hill wanted the bus to stop there. And also, I don't want my child being bused over to West End, or I don't want my child being bused to North, you know. And the problems, you were on the school board, you know.
Absolutely.
But I found it quite pleasant. And at the time, we had people coming to the Coatesville School District to see our school, making appointments and coming to see it. We actually had to have brochures that we'd give them because it just was just such a fine gem at that time.
I know you had problems with parental attitudes resistant to boundary lines changing in the 60s, but again, when I was on the board in the 90s, the same problems were there, resistance to changing boundary lines, attendance boundary lines. And in 30 years, it hadn't changed.
No, you will always have those,
Yes.
those problems. I know upstate, my father-in-law was quite a politician. In fact, he was campaign manager for Casey in one of his failures. But he took me once, he said, come on, we're going for a ride. He went down the bottom of a hill and into this back farm. As a young couple that had just moved there, and he said, I want to register you as a Democrat, and the bus will come and stop at your door. But of course, we're not that political here, but there's always the problems like that.
Always ways to get things
Right,
done when you
right.
can drag politics into
Right.
it. Horace, going back to the 60s again, what were some of the other issues? I know when we built a new high school, that was probably to eliminate some overcrowding.
Yes, what we did, in fact, the problem was, how do we do this now? What do we make Scott?
Mm-hmm.
And so we decided, well, we'll go 11th and 12th at Cash, and Scott will be 9th and 10th.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, so, well, how are we gonna work out some of these courses with the 10th graders that might have to come down? And then I said, well, we'll do it with the buses. I mean, and we'll schedule it and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Another complicated thing was the athletic program. How do we work that out? And then there was also the argument, well, is the 9th grader ready to be associated with the 10th grader? Because, see, we were 7th, 8th, and 9th,
Mm-hmm.
and Scott was 10th, 11th, and 12th. Well, nowadays, the 9th graders look like 18-year-olds, but in those days, the 9th grader was a little fellow, and it was a little girl and everything. But it worked out fine, and it didn't really create a problem. But it was basically the growth.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me assure you that after 30 years, when we had to reconfigure schools again, I know there was a great deal of concern as to whether 6th graders were ready to associate with 7th graders. A lot of hesitation there, but it happened, and I can't really see that we've had any problems with it. So,
No, a lot of times we make a big problem out of something that really isn't a problem. You just look at the figures and you do it, and it works out.
and it works out. But
Yeah.
hey, we're from Coatesville.
Right.
It's a tradition. Horace, I can imagine that there must have been a lot of improvements and advances in the science of dentistry. Tell us about some of your war stories as you're a practicing dentist in Coatesville.
Well, yeah. One of the things that was interesting was they wanted to put fluoride in the Coatesville water system.
I remember those days.
And there was a committee appointed. It was Dr. Dalton, myself, and Mrs. Yost, and we had an engineer, and we had all the studies, and we wrote to the American Dental Association, had it all figured out, and like 1.2 drops per million of fluoride and everything. However, when we went down to meet Mayor Gordon, someone had handed him a stack of pamphlets, inferring that this was a communist plot. And here was Dr. Bonsall and Mrs. Yost and Dr. Dalton. We communists were plotting against the city of Coastal Water Supply. But eventually it got in, and it's been a godsend. The most important thing as far as dentistry when I first came was the conversion of the old wheel pulley motor to the high-speed drill and the diamond stones, and that was just the most wonderful thing. And of course, there's an improvement in anesthetics, which was really great. A funny story, there was an elderly dentist right next to Hennessy's Pharmacy, and he, our church, I'm a member of the Methodist Church, which has decided to stay in Coatesville, incidentally. We had a small clinic down in Puerto Rico, and every time we get a chance to take medical equipment or dental equipment down. Well, he was retiring, so I went over to see him, and he said, sure. He said, we would take care of the ship. He said, you can have these chairs, you can have this and that. And he said, and the x-ray, and he points up to the x-ray, and he said, you can have that. He said, but you got to be very careful. He said, don't touch the high tension wire that runs across there. Well, I said, that must have been a pretty old X-ray, so we certainly didn't take that to Puerto Rico, but we did get some things for some chairs. And then when I retired, I got one of the nurses, Sandy Christ, and I said, Sandy, come on over to the office. I said, I'm sick and tired of that old chair that you have over there when I do the dental exams in the school district. I said, you want this chair? She came over and she said, yep. And the next day, the school district janitorial staff was there with a truck, and that chair's over at South Brandywine now.
Good for you.
Working out fine.
Good for you.
But that's basically the fondness of dentistry.
You mentioned Mayor Gordon, and we've talked about Pennsylvania Avenue. And I remember as a child seeing Mayor Gordon quite frequently out for a walk. This is after he retired with a baseball bat, and he's swinging it alternately from one hand to the other as he walked right up the dead center of Pennsylvania Avenue to the top of the hill for his daily exercise.
Right. And baseball bat triggers a memory of the Twilight League. I don't know whether you've interviewed people discussing that, where we would have 3,000 people over at Ash Park.
3,000 people at
Twilight
Ash Park
League
for
means
Twilight
means
Evening.
right in the evening. We're done working, we go there, and we would have the Sons of St. David's there and the Black Diamonds. It was this real good black baseball team. They would come in and play the local players and everything, and we had the Johnny McInerney was the old guy that would sell the peanuts. 20 peanuts to a bag. You'd never get 21. You'd never get 19. And it was a standard for us kids to tease him. And we'd say,
what did 20 peanuts cost?
5 cents. And we'd ask Johnny, "Do you have any ice cream? It's hot." And he said, "Sonny," he said, if I had ice cream, you'd want soup." So, but fun times and really nice. Central Park was, of course, quite an activity place for us as children, because we had no other place to go other than the Y, which I learned to swim there at the Y. But we were able to find activities, and wherever we lived, there was always a gang of us that would have a sports team, the 8th Avenue Sluggers or the Main Street Killers, and this and that. But it was fun times.
Horace, you've brought some memorabilia with you today, specifically some newspapers, old Coatesville records. And if size is any indication of value, these must have been pretty valuable papers in their day, because they seem to be a lot larger than normal. Talk to us about them.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of people have these collected. I bought these from an estate sale in Coatesville, and it's quite interesting. This one is the one, Hindenburg. We all remember that news clip and everything. And I always like to go through it to find the prices of what a suit costs then, or an automobile, and the familiar names of the people that we're old enough to remember. The columnist Dan Dobb that always wrote a personal column about things that were happening in Coatesville. And I bought these in a sale. I outbid somebody. I offered $2, and he only wanted this. And I have a whole stack of them home. And then, of course, more to my age was it, but look at the size of these papers now, and they're really full of lots of fun things that I'll read about periodically. I remember I worked at the 5 and 10 cent store at Woolworths, and I remember that June coming to work early in the morning, and I was supposed to pick up the pile of papers and take them in, and I looked, and I saw on the headlines as a U.S. drops atom bomb on Japan, and I didn't have the slightest idea what
that meant.
And of course I do now, certainly. And I don't have that with me, but I also have a copy of that. But these are just interesting newspapers.
Horace, here we are in 1999, and we've come a long way from the years that you've described. We've seen a lot of changes. What are the issues that Coatesville is faced with currently, as you're telling me of your work in the Planning Commission?
Well, I was fortunate enough first to be on the search committee for a new city administrator, and that was quite a lot of work, a lot of good candidates, and I'm just so delighted of who we got with Paul Jensen. The Planning Commission is sort of the buffer, the study group. We hire engineers and we do all the work on the plans, the architectural plans on all the projects. And once we pass on, it goes to council for them to approve or disapprove. So we see all the things that are going to be happening first. You're, of course, familiar with the theater up at the Mass building.
Mm-hmm.
That first comes right to the Planning Commission with the architectural drawings. We just currently worked and passed on to council with the big project up on the hill of 360 homes that's up above the dump area there, and that's been passed on and in the process. Just last night, we met with the Housing Authority there in order to tear down the projects that are up on the hill there. There's still about 56 people that have to be relocated, and they're mostly elderly. And at west of Ash Park, where Gold's Gym was, if people remember there, and it was a plumbing place before that, that they're going to build a 60-foot high, beautiful building there to house the elderly.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Washington Fire Company is, there's a remaining 15 slightly disabled. I hate to use that term, but we're going to put the remainders in that, and they're in the process now at the Washington Hotel to take care of that. Let's see. We're dealing down at the bottom of 10th Avenue and Main Street next to the Golf Station at 10th and Main. The Coatesville Hospital is considering putting a satellite office there for people that have no transportation, that will be able to come there with their problems. That's in the works. We're in state of flux with the pediatric center over in West End next to the West End Fire Company. There's still some problems with that, but we hope that develops, that they rebuild that.
Mm-hmm.
But there are many projects going on, and most of them are going to be fulfilled. And the final one that they're working on is this gateway area where Devitt's was.
Yes.
And that's going to be cleared out, and the city has purchased that land, and that's going to be a beautiful entrance coming down 82 that you'll be able to see. So there's a lot of projects that are going on.
Just for our viewers that are watching, I'll mention that Devitt's was at the corner of First and Harmony,
Right,
to help pinpoint that location. Horace, you mentioned the theater in the Mast building, and
Mhm.
you are, of course, speaking of the Coatesville Cultural Society.
Right.
I think the society was one of the most significant and noticeable attempts at beginning to revitalize Coatesville. And I'm interested in knowing what were the impressions on the Planning Commission as the Cultural Society came forward with what it intended to do. They were a society that has been in a number of smaller venues. They were on Harmony Street for a
Right.
while.
I think
and then,
didn't you read poetry there?
yes, I did.
Yeah.
And they moved to another storefront
Mhm.
in Coatesville, and then now they're where they're currently in the Mast building.
Mhm.
But I'm interested in knowing the Planning Commission's viewpoint
Mhm.
on what they wanted to do and hoped to do.
Yeah, well, like with anything, the planning and everything, it was wonderful.
Mhm.
But the first thing you say, well, money. And we're fortunate in the past 5 years, there have been just a multitude of grants and things that come. But what they wanted to do was great. I mean, I consider myself an educated person, and gee, this is wonderful. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it. So, of course, the Planning Commission, it's all not the glorious visions and everything. We're talking how many parking places can you do?
Yeah, the nitty-gritty.
What type of front? Have you met with the Historical Society? Because we got to preserve this front.
Yes.
So a lot of it's technical, but they, the best and quickest one that I just thought was great was on 2nd Avenue, that for the elderly, and Chestnut Street and 2nd Avenue. They took the old Steel City building and gutted it and converted that into rooms for the elderly, and all of them were made so that they could be converted for the handicap, should that couple become handicapped, everything. And then it goes on down Chestnut Street towards First, and that was just a beautiful piece of work, and they had, the money was there, and they did it, and there was very little problems with the neighborhood. And that's right behind Coatesville Savings, and then on up to Chestnut Street. And then they bought the old Savings and Loan building across the street. And the Skiatis brothers donated a piece of land up behind that eventually they'll make like a little park for the elderly to be in there. That was another nice project. I almost forgot about that, and that was a major project. So we're trying, and there's a lot of projects that come on board that fail, and my current wish now is if they could solve the Scott problem. Of course, the Planning Commission doesn't get into that until the problem's solved, and then they come to us.
Right, they come to you for an approval.
Right.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground historically, but give me your observations for the future. What are your hopes? What do you think we as a community need to do to make our environment a better place to live?
Well, what we're doing now, of course, is the city has to take down the old buildings by these out-of-town owners and everything. They have to be raised, they have to be torn down, even if you just make a parking lot or put a Christmas tree or plant some trees and everything, and beautify the place. Some of the places don't have to be so crowded with boarded up areas. You can do that. All right, crime, we just have to have a good police force, a good police chief to try to settle that. You're never going to be able to bring back a J.C. Penney's, a Sears and Roebuck's and everything. We always talk about if you want to see a place that really came back and did it the right way is Manayunk. They have some small restaurants, they have these small crafty stores and different things like that, and people start to come back to them. The historical situation with the Greystone Society is a great idea. There are people coming from all over the county now to their concerts on Sunday and seeing these beautiful restored buildings and everything. So, but don't ask for something you're not going to get. If you could come back to a Manayunk, people don't know, if you start at 6th Avenue and you go down to 10th Avenue, that's a very, very bustling economy. You look at all those stores, you may say, well, they're just doing, yeah, but the money's there. You look at the steak shops and you look at the
eateries and yes.
Right. So I hope it happens, whether it'll happen in my lifetime or not, but anything similar to Manayunk is something like that situation, I think.
There's bound to be an improvement.
Right.
Yes. Well, Dr. Horace Bonsall, I want to thank you for being with us today and being a part of our oral history project created on behalf of the Coatesville Library.
We're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.